Well, shalom, shalom. Hi, it's Kim from Coffee with Kim tonight, and I'm excited to be with you. We're not going to be on too long tonight, but I thought we'd do something a little bit new. And we're going to take a look at a clip tonight. Let me just see. Here we go. We're going to take a look at a clip tonight by Jake Tapper. And he really challenges both the narrative between the white supremacist and the Arab hatred narrative that we see here in Israel. And then what I want to do is I want to go through the Twitter feed on the feedback of what he said. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you I think you'll be able to see it. All right.
Is that, you hear conservatives all the time, rightly so in my opinion, talk about the tone set by people in the Arab world. Palestinian leaders talking about, and the way they talk about Israelis, justifying in the same way you're doing, no direct link necessarily between what the leader says and the violence against some poor Israeli girl in a pizzeria, but the idea that you're validating this hatred. Yeah. And yet people don't, you can't compare the ideology of Hamas with anything else, but at the same time, if either tone matters or it doesn't, is that, you hear conservatives all the time, rightly so in my opinion, talk about the tone set by people in the Arab world. Palestinian leaders talking about, and the way they talk about Israelis, justifying in the same way you're doing, no direct link necessarily between what the leader says and the violence against some poor Israeli girl in a pizzeria, but the idea that you're validating this hatred. Yeah. And yet people don't, you can't compare the ideology of Hamas with anything else, but at the same time, if either tone matters or it doesn't.
Okay.
Is that, you hear conservatives.
So,
rightly so.
That was Jake Tapper from CNN. Kind of, really bringing to the forefront, all right, that there are tones that accompany hate. And, equitably, really setting the stage of what kind of hatred sits behind the terrorist narrative in the Middle East, and what kind of hatred sits behind what they're calling the white nationalist hatred rising in America. And if I was to take that a little bit further, it's funny to me why we don't have people calling out the visceral hatred that actually comes from the progressive left. So, but what was interesting about this is I just decided, here we are, CNN, and this tweet happened to be posted by a woman named Sana Saeed. And so I thought I would just take a scroll through this Twitter feed, and I'll let you know I did respond, actually, to a few of these. But, it gives you a good pulse of what people are thinking. So she's the one that puts up this, or probably doesn't put it up, but she's the one that furthers this this segment of Jake Tapper. And she said, "This is the height of unethical journalism." Oh, really? And how do you innate that? And she's like, at Jack Tapper, "You invoke Palestinian and Arabs as a comparison to white national violence in the U.S.? Okay, that's fair game. What's wrong with that? This is blatant anti-Arab bigotry and Islamophobia." Really? Okay. Is that really the case there? Okay. All right. CNN needs to take action. Okay. So then there's a reply. And the reply is, "Jake is part of a trend of agreeing with dominant population privilege over non-dominant populations. He just doesn't want the racist rapper that goes with it, like not like a rapper, like a song rapper, but WRAPP, like a rapper, like a candy rapper, all right? All right, what people think is okay against non-dominant populations overseas, they will soon be okay with here in the States, what people think. I did respond to that one. I'd love to hear your response, but I'm like, population privilege? What about non-dominant entitlement? Same thing as stealing, but who talks about that? So there we go, folks. That was one of my responses to this. You know, it's interesting to actually get the colloquial language that's going on. You know, you've got jargon here, and now we've got the population, the dominant population, not the white, all right, but the dominant population privilege over non-dominant populations, all right? So one is privileged and one is not privileged, okay? All right. Well, I think the non-dominant population in America might be privileged. They get all the government handouts. So that's terrible for me to say that. On the one hand, I'm really joking, but on the other hand, I'm not, because this is the inequity in so much of not just from the middle class to the upper class in America, but the fact that we have cultivated with using welfare, using Medicare, using handouts. We have cultivated even raising generations without having to take personal responsibility. We have cultivated generations now. And population sex of entitled people groups. So entitlement is such it's such a strong force in America right now. We see it with the immigration issue, but nobody ever calls out what entitlement really is, and that's it's stealing. That's exactly what it is. And so maybe somebody needs to talk about that. Let's see here. All right. So Linda replies. She replies and she says, go to China, people still look Chinese. Go to Mexico, most people still look Latino. Go to India, you see Indians. The U.S. is all mixed races. If the U.S. is so racist, then why are thousands of people sneaking in, even swimming here, climbing fences, endangering their lives to live here? You go, Linda. You get a heart from me. All right. It says, by the way, I had to click show more. It says showing more may be very offensive. And so... let's see. I had there was a whole list of these responses, and I don't know where they all went. But let's see if I can get any more here. More replies. Anyways. Oh, maybe I can go back to the original tweet. Here we are. Okay. All right. So then, all right, we're back. This is relating to the clip that I just showed you on Jake Tapper. We're going through the Twitter feed. Let's see. So Santa Saeed, she just keeps rattling. She goes on. Jake Tapper hosted white nationalist Rich Spencer on his show just a couple weeks ago, in which country does Spencer look to as a model to follow for his white nationalist state? Israel. But Tapper instead compares white nationalists to the U.S., in the U.S., to Arabs and Palestinians. So that's not exactly what he did, by the way. He was comparing the visceral hatred. He was actually comparing the apple and the apple, one to another when it comes to terrorism. All right. So here's another guy. All right. He says, aren't Israelis the ones who are shooting unarmed protesters, medics, and press men, women, and children? What's wrong with this guy? Yeah, I did comment to that too. I'm like, did you ever check your facts? This is so not true. All right, so you see how people are looking through a lens that has been created through propaganda. The last thing, the entire viewpoint of Israel, the way they think, Israelis think, it is all centered around the collective, the conscience of the nation, the collective perspective of life. The ethos or the underlying theme that operates this country is, if you save a life, you save an entire world. So, killing, murder, shooting, that is not even part of the culture here. Apart from national defense, defending ourselves specifically against enemies that surround us through deterrence and through individual and collective combat. So, right? He's got it wrong. So I definitely comment on that. Then you've got another one that says, Jake is part of a trend of agreeing with dominant population privilege. Now, that's the one I already read. So I already told you guys that one. Okay. Then Jerry Levy climbs in here on Twitter, and he says, Palestinian media, politicians, and clergy publicly call for the mass murder of Jews and Israelis. Just a simple fact that is easy to Google if one cares. It's not bigotry to point out this raw hatred. Go Jerry, he gets a heart from me tonight. All right. And then we have Dobie's like, I'm just going to leave this right here. And he puts up a link. Hamas leader calls for the murders of Jews. All right. And then we have another one weighing in here. Jack Tapper is anti-Islam and anti-Palestinian. He has been forever, and he continues to be. His bigotry and his Islamophobia are well documented, but must be good for business. Shame on you, CNN. Well, so there you have it. This is how shaming goes on. You try to be objective. You try to look at the situation for what it is, and you will be called out as a racist. You'll be called out as an anti-this or an anti-that. Without any context whatsoever. In fact, here, right above it, the tweet above it is, just saying, I'll show it to you, right above it. Here we go. Here you go, there it is. Hamas leader calls for the killing of Jews, the murder of Jews. And right below it, this guy says, well, if you say that, then you're anti-Islam and you're anti-Palestinian. Well, I am anti-Islam. I mean, there is no doubt about it. I'm anti any religion or any terrorist organization in the earth that calls for jihad or the death of human life and civilians. So yes, I am anti. And I am not anti-Palestinian per se. Palestinians have the same inalienable rights as every other human being does. But I am anti-terrorist organizations. I am anti-hate, and I am against the way they indoctrinate their children to hate Jews, to hate Americans, to hate themselves. Yeah, I'm anti this totalitarian type of government that oversees the rule of the Palestinian people. So he deserves a comment. All right. So then you come to the next guy, and he says he's right. The rhetoric of Hamas and Abbas is, if anything, worse than DT's and very similar to David Duke in inciting terrorism, and it causes civilians death. In fact, Duke admires their anti-Semitism. Now, we've talked about David Duke before. You know that he's a friend of the president's. And so far, we haven't had, personally, I haven't done a lot of research into what they would call his white supremacist attitude. So I can't comment on that, but nevertheless. All right, so anyways, what an interesting feed. But as you see, here's another one that comes on as an Arab man, even though he has quite a Jewish name, Noah Burner. That just may be his tagline here. He says, yesterday I was talking about this. No matter what a white man does, so it's all about the white man, they will find a way to focus the word terrorism on the Arab Muslim man. Well, that's where terror comes from, folks. In its finest array of organizational truths. So this is where it comes from. However, it's interesting that this is how they they portray it. This is a white, first it's the white man and the black man, and it's the white man and the Indian, and then it's the white man and the Arab man. So, the white man. Okay, so let's see, one more comment on this Twitter feed. It's not, and so you really get to see the narrative that's being perpetrated here. It says white nationalists are more akin to the Israeli occupational forces. Belief in superior race. They've got to be joking. Occupation, use of violence to implement radical ideology based on that race. So all I would say for this writer is, you know what? I can say that's not the truth, but the reality of it is worse than that. That's a particular narrative that is not true. If you want to look at superior race and those that work towards that, you want to go back and look at Hitler, all right, in the Aryan race, okay, yeah. Hitler was white, yes, European, okay, and he had radical ideology based on race, but that's extremely, let's see, what should we say? That element, even though it had some roots, believe it or not, in different pockets of America, that is not the American ethos at any level. So you really get to see how anyone that brings up these issues, any journalist that brings up these issues gets demonized. So, anyways, all right, Ramona. Okay, it says, I'm happy to hear the truth about this so-called racism. The enemy has the new organizations dancing to his music. Yeah, unfortunately I can't see more, Ramona. I'll have to take a look at it. you know, it's just extremely, extremely interesting to follow a Twitter feed and see how hatred feeds hatred. And you know, it's so important when you are on social media that instead of feeding hatred, that you feed righteousness, that you look, and if you're going to comment, you comment not only with love. You know, very, very important to comment when you are utilizing social media in a way that begets an attitude that is compassionate, but you don't want to feed hatred. So you either want to deflect, or what you want to do is you want to call out the issue. You know, you don't want to go after the individual, you want to go after the issue. Very, very, very important. When I look at situations, I may, you know, say this person said this or this person, but if I'm going to go after an issue, it's going to be the issue itself. Because one of the things you just don't want to do is you don't want to disparage the character of others, which is just so blatant on everything we do in social media. Hey Lila, it is good to see you. All right, now, okay, so let's go to the Jerusalem Post right now. I commented on the fact that a lot of people are asking me, what about Rashidi Tlaib? What about Ilan Omar? What about these women and their little delegation, by the way, that is now being funded by AIPAC? What about them coming to Israel? What should Israel do? President Trump has said you should not let them in the country. We have those that are in positions, I don't remember their names right off the bat, and I do not have that article in front of me. But we also see in Congress, we have like congressional leaders that are saying, you know, we need to let them go. So there's a lot of tension. What should we do? Should we let them into Israel? Should we not let them into Israel? And here's how I look at it. All right. The truth is, we have two choices here in Israel. It's simple choices. We let them in or we don't let them in, right? So let's say we don't let them in. Let's play out that scenario for a minute, okay? So we ban these BDS supporters because actually it is illegal. If you are a supporter of BDS, you are not allowed in this country. They will stop you with security and you will not get in. And here, these women are. They incite hatred. They incite violence. They're pro-BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. They demonize Israel at every turn, and yet we have this conundrum because we wouldn't let, you know, the common guy that's doing the very same thing, or other leaders of these sects and groups that do this into the country. So why would we allow these women just because they're congresswomen? Well, first of all, they are in political office, shamefully. And second of all, we have to play out that scenario. What if Israel says no? So here's what potentially could happen. The international community in its finest, the United Nations, the European Union, and every other anti-Israel organization on the face of the earth will all scream and they will call out Israel, and this whole kind of political parlay will play itself out. So we've got the international community that will come against Israel. Then in addition to that, you have the potential riots that will take place with the Palestinians, okay, here in Israel. Hamas will probably launch a few 100 rockets over into the south if they're not allowed to come. So the whole political status of the countries surrounding Israel and in Europe and its involvement, they'll just all go crazy. Everybody just go nuts. And so we said no. Then, so we let them in. Let's play that situation out for a minute. So we let them in. Okay, so what's the worst they can do? All right, so they're going to go home to their families. They're going to say, hey, keep praying for us. We're in office. We're going to defeat President Trump. All right. They could probably shout a couple of Allah Akbars down the road. They could give a couple of speeches, pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, speeches over in the areas of Ramallah, and I don't know if they'll be invited over into the Gaza area. Maybe that's where Ilhan's going. I don't know. But, they'll do that, say a couple of derogatory things, and they'll leave. Okay. So which would you choose? Difficult situation. Well, I'll tell you what I would choose. I think, we don't need the riots. We don't need international opinion. And I would say, okay, pray. Everybody pray. And pray about them being here. Pray that they do not have the liberty to speak. Pray that they're thwarted at every turn. And let them do their thing. And let them go home. Nobody's going to be the worse off or the better off here. All right? And, but with that said, let me just say that Rashida Tlaib is a very dangerous individual when it comes to her rhetoric. And I'm very, very sensitive when people rewrite truth. And I think most of you are as well. So one of the headlines in the paper today, in the Jerusalem Post, is Rashida Tlaib says Palestinians are not responsible for terrorism. All right, if you believe that, I'll sell you the Brooklyn Bridge too. That is insanity. And it's finest. This is a 2-minute read. Okay, let me just quote. I think this is a quote, okay? Comparing Palestinian human rights activists to terrorists, white nationalist is fundamentally a lie, tweeted the Democratic representative on Monday. Comparing Palestinian, so terrorists are now, okay, are you ready? This is the new language, okay? Terrorists are now Palestinian human rights activists, or advocates, not even an activist, they're an advocate. So there you go, folks. It says everything. So Representative Rashida Tlaib from Michigan, all right, our nice Sharia law state, has tweeted that Palestinians are not responsible for terrorism and they do not spew negative rhetoric against the state of Israel. So did I just show you that nice picture there of Hamas, calling for the murder of all Jews? So, I mean, it just doesn't get any more deceptive than this. All right, so this is the big tweet. So she says, here you go. Comparing Palestinian, this is the tweet. Human rights advocates to terrorists, white nationalists is fundamentally a lie. Palestinians want equality, human dignity, and to stop the imprisonment of children. White supremacy is calling for the domination of one race with the use of violence. Okay? Comparing, let's see, here we go. We've already said that. Tlaib was responding to a statement made by CNN's Jake Tapper that Palestinian rhetoric is similar to that of the President Donald Trump. Now, okay, so let's just go back for a minute and let's just kind of wrap this conversation up with this thought. So the Palestinians, all right, she says, okay, want equality, human dignity, and to stop the imprisonment of children. Now, unfortunately, you will never hear that in the news. The only thing that you do hear in what they want on a consistent daily basis is for the total annihilation of the state of Israel. They want the Jews annihilated, the state of Israel annihilated, and they want complete and total domination of this area of the world. All right? So, I'd like to hear what you think. Do you think that is on par with what we're hearing from the white nationalists? Would love to hear what you think. All right. Hey, Jack. Hey, Ramona. Favor, so good to see you. Kathy, good to see you. Mark Morgan, very good to see you. All right, Ramona. Okay, everybody. So this is not my normal. I don't have my paper today. I don't know where it went. It wasn't outside my door today. So I just picked up a couple things that I thought were worth, really kind of worth taking a look at. There was a couple of interesting posts today here in Israel as far as Iran is concerned. So I'll just give you a little overview very quickly of the news. First of all, there's a Swiss intel report right now that Iran will wait and Trump government out on nuclear pact. Okay, so that particular article is, just saying that, in fact, I'll just give you a little bit of it. Let's see if I can pull that up real quick. Okay, I can't hold it long enough, so I'll have to pull it up here. Okay, so just so you know, Iran will not abandon its missiles, just so you see it right there. Okay, there's all their missiles. These are M302 rockets found aboard the Class C ship. They are displayed at an Israeli naval base in the Red Sea city of Eilat right now. As of March 10th, this was in 2014, the ship seized by the Israeli Navy on suspicion of smuggling arms from Iran to the Gaza Strip, docked on Saturday in Israel, which planned to put cargo on display. So this was actually and took place in 2014. So here we go. Switzerland's, I apologize, this is why I like the newspaper, because the website of the Post is just terrific. It just refreshes like every few seconds. Switzerland's intelligence service of the Federation revealed in its recent report that the Islamic Republic of Iran will stay in the nuclear deal and wait out the November 2020 U.S. elections in hope that President Donald Trump suffers an electoral defeat. Now, if you have been with me over the past couple months, I spoke very, very specific about how Iran has been involved in its attempt to defeat presidents before. This is not the first time, and this is their major goal right now. Their major goal is not to start a nuclear arms race or to actually start a war. Their goal, everything that's going on in the Straits of Hormuz, everything that you see that's going on behind the scenes with Iran has only one goal, and that is to create a narrative in an image of President Trump that will work against him in the elections. So that's something to pray very, very seriously, because that is Iran's goal. This is what they did back in the days of Carter, back in the time of, if you might remember, the hostage situation in Iran. They played that hostage situation so that Carter would not be reelected. Now, very, very interesting scenarios. So it goes on to say that the Jerusalem Post examined a 79-page document which cited Iran's clerical regime 50 times and included sections on Tehran's nuclear missile, terrorism, espionage, and cyber spy activities. The Iranian leadership will try to wait President Trump out with strategic patience. Iran will continue to adhere to the provisions of the nuclear agreement that ended in 2016. The only problem with this whole statement right now, and you all know what I'm saying is true, they haven't adhered to it from day one. So why does anyone think they're going to adhere to it now when they're not adhering to it? How many articles have we just pointed out in the last few weeks of the renewed and even not just renewed uranium enrichment, but the escalation of uranium enrichment? They have so blown this agreement, and Europe does nothing. It just sits in its appeasement phase, and nobody says anything because they don't want to rock the boat. The only one that wants to rock the boat because of the inequity of the whole situation is President Trump. He hates inequity. It's very, very obvious he hates inequity. Well, God hates inequity, folks. And God says that a man that fears God, will actually hate inequity, and he will do his very best to be equitous, all right? He will hate injustice, and he will do his very best to do what it takes to impute justice, all right? And he will hate unrighteousness. And so he will do his very best to live a life and invoke righteousness into whatever situation he is engaged in. This is the three pillars: justice, righteousness, equity. These are the pillars, and mercy. I mean, all of it is cloaked in mercy and kindness and compassion. But this whole lie, we have just started the night with lies that have echo chambers in the media world. They're just being spewed out and told over and over and over, trying to get at the hearts of men to believe that which is not true. And so once again, just reading this article and just Iran saying publicly, oh, we're going to wait this out with strategic patience, and we're going to adhere to the provisions of the nuclear agreement that ended in 2016. Well, they never adhered to it. It's far-reaching international political isolation, but Iran will also continue to support anti-Israel forces in the region, albeit with much less financial commitment, because they're not getting so much money from America. All right, Iran will not abandon its ballistic missile program, which it already has targeted short-range missiles, said the intelligence documents. The Swiss intelligence findings were disclosed in May. However, the conduct of Iran's regime can be viewed as refuting some of the key conclusions in the document. In July, Iran's rulers violated the nuclear deal, formerly known as the JCPA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and via increased uranium arrangement, where I just mentioned that, but that was very specific, 3.7 to 5%. The rise in enriched uranium puts Iran's regime back on course to develop atomic weapons. If the regime hits the 20% level of enriched uranium, the threshold to building a nuclear bomb, at rapid fire pace could be reached. Well, you know, there's a lot of speculation that already is very, very close or exists. So that's why Israel is just so vehement over the issues concerning Iran. So this is an interesting article. I should put this up. Okay, so that is where Iran sits right now, but make no mistake, Iran's agenda is very, very specific into trying to portray President Trump in a way that he will not be reelected. So that's the agenda. So the only thing, you know, I'm always reminded of the pasuk, that passage that says, and I'm trying to think of what book, because I believe it's from the book of Job. And so it's, disappoint the devices of the crafty, that their hands cannot perform their enterprises. It's an excellent way to pray. It's an excellent prayer to God, to tell him, you know, regarding the enemies against Israel in this earth, and even against the United States, you know, to pray that he would confound all of their malicious, manipulative, and evil ways, all right? Their craftiness, their wiles, all right? Disappoint the devices of the crafty, so that their hands, so that their intent, and when we're talking about hands, you know, a lot of times hands always depict intent. So when we're looking at intent, he says, so that their hands, or their intentions, okay, will not prosper. So this is exactly how you would pray about a situation like this. So now, we talked a lot about China yesterday. The other thing that's in the news is that China is moving troops to the Hong Kong border. Oh, the Hong Kongese have absolutely should I just say ticked off the Chinese? This is a real battle right now. You want to pray for the Hong Kong people. I remember being in Hong Kong before it was turned back to China, in a meeting discussing what was going to be done once it was turned back to China. And it was a very sad day for everybody. Nobody wanted to go back to China. Why would you want to go back under that kind of rule when you have freedom? So it was a very sad day. And now the population of Hong Kong, they are rising up, and they're saying, listen, we do not want to be under the Chinese leadership and regime. So now, of course, China's taking military force because of the protests have not, they have tried to stop the protests in Hong Kong. They have not been able to successfully do so. All right. Another very interesting article, I'll come back to it in a minute, regarding Hamas. Another very sad also development is Israel to build additional wall with Gaza to prevent infiltration. So, you know, I don't know anybody in this country that likes to have walls between people groups and places. But unfortunately, the reason we have walls is because they just the Palestinians, unfortunately, have not quite understood the concept that terrorism is not welcome in Israel. They just don't get it. So, with that said, it's sad that we have to put another wall up. It's just horrific to me that it's also, there's so many times as a parent, I'm sure, with your children, where you say, this is the consequence. If you do A, the consequence will be B. So if you don't want that consequence, then don't do it. So the Palestinians scream, of the fact that there's a wall and there's checkpoints. And okay, you don't want checkpoints? You don't want walls? Stop the terrorism. Build your own country. The solution is so simple. What are you going to do? Malasot. So very sad. But the other was the fact that Hamas, such an interesting deal. Hamas deploys security forces to stop terrorists reaching Israel. Hamas did not comment on the report, which came after the IDF thwarted 3 attempts by terrorists to infiltrate the border of Israel. There we go. Hamas's security forces are preventing Palestinians from approaching the security fence along the border between the Gaza Strip and Israel, a source close to Hamas said. We haven't seen that yet, but the source told the Palestinian news agency Ahmad that Hamas has beefed up its security forces near the border with Israel after the recent terrorist attacks, during which terrorists infiltrated into Israel. We had a couple of people die this past week. Also, we had a very interesting case just happened. There was an Israeli stewardess from one of the El Al flights. She contracted measles about 6 months ago, and she just died. I'll see if I can find that report real quick. So let me continue this. On Saturday, 4 heavily armed terrorists were killed while they attempted to infiltrate into Israel from the Gaza Strip. A few hours later, the IDF shot and killed a terrorist who opened fire on troops near the security fence. Very interesting that Hamas is saying that it's beefing up security in that area. So we'll come back to that in a week or so and see how well they have done. They haven't done so well lately. And so let me see if I can find, and I'll close tonight. These are the main things. This thing with the Chinese and the Hong Kong border, we'll take a look at that tomorrow because there'll be a lot more information on it. Let's see here. Let's see if we have, let me see if I can find her. If she's in this, hold on everybody, don't go anywhere. Let me see if I can find, that was another very interesting situation in Australia too. There was a massive terrorist attack in Australia, and some men took down the terrorist with chairs and fruit boxes and whatever. But he went on a stabbing frenzy, shouting Allah Akbar. And even though he's considered to be a lone Muslim, nevertheless, terrorism. So let me see if I don't see it. But anyways, a very interesting situation with measles here in Israel. So this stewardess, and I can't find the article, so I can't tell you her name, but she just died. And there's been about 4,005, here she is, here it is, about 4,500 cases of people that have contracted measles. El Al, flight attendant, dies after contracting measles on flight. She had had one vaccination, but she didn't have two. She was, her name is Rotem Amitai, and our hearts go out to her family. A 43-year-old female El Al flight attendant died in the hospital on Tuesday, 5 months after contracting measles from a passenger on a flight from New York to Tel Aviv in March. Several days after returning to Israel, the mother of 3 was hospitalized. She later entered into a coma and suspected brain damage. All right. So they say that the lack of vaccinations is what did this. Of course, there's a lot of accolades as a mother. And then not only, once the case became known, they did vaccinate the rest of the people, but 4,250 people had been infected with measles here in Israel between March of 2018 and 2019. So they are trying to get people vaccinated for that. They're very sad and very, very unique story. So on that note, let me see who's with us. Juan, it's good to see you. Shelley, it's so good to see you. James, it's good to see you. Tim, great to see you. William, Lila, thanks again, Ramona. All right, everybody, it is wonderful to be with you. So anyways, just to recap for all of you that were with us at the very beginning, we showed a clip from Jake Tapper from CNN, and then we went through the Twitter feed on this particular segment of his show to see how he was demonized by those really, I would say those that would be in the progressive segment, and how, what he was saying was twisted. So we went through that, and then we just talked about some news around the world. So anyways, hope you enjoyed tonight, and it's so good to be with you again. It's a little later than normal, so I'm going to say goodnight, and really good to be with you, and we will see you tomorrow. Okay, all the best, and have a great day. God bless. Bye-bye.